every media copied the nonsense of other media. They wanted to stay in the narrative. They wanted to produce fake news. So everything is in the files. But Western press doesn't quote the files. They don't want to know. They want to follow NATO narrations and NATO propaganda, because the European Union is run by transatlantically corrupted elites. Most members of the German elite linked their personal career to transatlantic organizations like German Marshall Fund, Young Global Leaders. In Western country, there is no protest, no opposition. We need a peace movement. And the demonstrations in Berlin, the demonstration in Berlin on October 3rd, we have 15 to 20,000 people. In a country with a population of 85 million, what is that? A joke? So propaganda works.
So Patrik, could you just give a short explanation of what you mean with the Maidan coup? Wasn't it the revolution of dignity?
Yes, it was not a revolution of dignity. According to the study of Ivan Kachanovsky, the Maidan massacre, published in the last year, Ivan Kachanovsky is a professor of Ottawa State University in Canada, and he is of Ukrainian origin. The massacre, with about 100 killings on the Maidan, was organized and orchestrated by NATO, EU, and the United States. And he found a lot of proofs. He talked to more than 100 witnesses. He found video proofs, and he saw a lot of files. And the result is there were 8 sniper groups underway. 4 sniper groups from Georgia, 2 sniper groups, fascists of the West Ukraine area, and 1 sniper group of Poland and 1 sniper group of Lithuania. In each sniper group, 10 well-educated and trained men, professionals. There were discussions between EU diplomats and Ukraine militant fascists on the ground in Kiev. And the fascists asked the EU diplomats, it was a negotiation like on a market, what do you think how many assassinations we need to make Western European governments to bring in a position to overthrow the legally, democratically elected president of Ukraine, Yanukovych? And Western diplomat says, oh, about 100. And this was the result on the Maidan. We had 100 dead bodies. The fascists did exactly what they were told by European diplomats. So this was a Western orchestrated coup. And in the time before the coup, this Mr. Parubi, Andrei Parubi, who was killed 4 weeks ago in Lvov, told the public, we have more than 10,000 men under weapons, and if the Maidan will fail, we will start a civil war. So everything is in the files. But Western press doesn't quote the files. They don't want to know. They want to follow NATO narrations and NATO propaganda. And so we got in September 2022. And this was the time when the Russian Federation organized the referenda in Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye and Cherson to bring those areas into the Russian Federation. And I was seen by Russian television. They showed me standing and making interviews at the polling stations. And so the narrative of the German press was, this guy must be not a reporter, but an illegal poll watcher of Mr. Putin. And, well, the authorities asked me to join a press conference, and I agreed. I didn't think about that. And I criticized the authorities because they had a lot of poll stations under free air in public, and you couldn't give your vote secretly. You couldn't vote secretly. And I criticized that. But you have to keep in mind, I couldn't manage to find one single person who was against joining the Russian Federation. And you have to keep in mind the real situation on the ground since 2014. In Lugansk and Donetsk, we had, up from April 2014, 2 separate republics. And they were under fire, under shelling from the Ukraine side for 8 years, with more than 14,000 dead bodies, a lot of children. And those people felt threatened. They said, we want peace, but the only way to peace is inside the Russian Federation. We cannot have peace with our murderers. The Ukrainian central government, the coup government after 2014, made laws against the rights of the Russian minority in eastern Ukraine. Russian was not a state speech anymore. And the third level is, since the year 2000, 2005, the standard of living in the Russian Federation grew up, and at the same time, the standard of living in Ukraine fell down. And many families in eastern Ukraine have relatives in Russia, and they observed that exactly. And everybody thought we could have a better life in Russia. And these are things which is not covered by the Western press.
I heard from Glenn Diesen that before the coup, 2014,
yes,
there was 20% of the population in the whole of Ukraine that wanted to join NATO.
Yes.
So there was
no. It's a minority.
It wasn't a popular opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And these people are located in the Western Ukraine, who were part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire until the end of the First World War, but not located in the eastern part of the country. Because everybody in the eastern part of the country, this is a steel region with hard-working people, and this region was given from Russia to the Soviet Union of Ukraine in 1922. Originally, those are Russian men and women.
Yeah. I was also wondering about, maybe you want to tell us that, about this narrative control. What happened to you later on in Germany?
Yes.
In response to your reporting in Ukraine.
So I was named as a poll watcher of Mr. Putin and the best friend of Mr. Putin and a Russian propagandist and all that shit. Well, those journalists didn't do their job. They have to prove the original information. One single phone call to Moscow would have been enough to bring things clear. Is this Mr. Baab a poll watcher? Just send me your list. Nobody did. But every media copied the nonsense of other media. They wanted to stay in the narrative. They wanted to produce fake news. So I lost 2 teaching assignments at university, and the way out for the Americans is to send in the Europeans, to Europeanize the war. And what the Europeans are doing, that's their business.
And that means Ukrainifying Europe.
Ukraine is?
That means Ukrainifying Europe.
The European Union should, according to Washington, pay the price of the war. They should pay the price for the rearmament by buying American stuff, military equipment, and probably they should go in and send an expedition corps to Ukraine soil to fight the Russians. They want to have the Russians busy without being involved directly. That's the point at the moment. And Mr. Trump underestimated that this war cannot end without meeting the Russian demands. Because for the Kremlin, this is a war of decision. It's an all-in war. They cannot accept to have American missiles 500 kilometers away from Moscow. It is similar to the Cuban crisis. The Americans couldn't accept to have Soviet missiles on Cuba just 80 miles away from their own country. When Trump came up with the idea to bring Beijing under pressure by tariffs, Beijing sold out American bonds and bought gold. And this was the reason for the gold price went up to an all-time high level. This is the background. And the Chinese showed the American, you want to set us under pressure? It will be a boomerang. We can show you that. So for the Americans, it is very difficult. They cannot fight the Chinese and India with all means because of economic dependence. But what they can do, they can suppress and exploit the European Union, because the European Union is run by transatlantically corrupted elites. Most members of the German elite linked their personal career to transatlantic organizations like German Marshall Fund, Young Global Leaders, organizations like that. Our finance minister, our chancellor, well, BlackRock melts, it's very clear.
A question in relation to the sanctions imposed on 2 German citizens, Alina Lepp and Thomas Röper. They have been, their assets have been seized, and they lack the possibility to appeal this decision, just for being, as it's called, spreaders of Russian disinformation within the European Union. Are you in any way worried that these sanctions might in future be applied to yourself?
Yes.
Yes. It's a very short.
It's a short answer. The next one will be Professor Ulrike Gero and me. And, well, Alina Lipp and Thomas Röper are living in the Russian Federation. So they could not be prosecuted by German justice. But the reason to put Alina Lipp and Thomas Röper under sanctions is not to focus on Alina Lipp and Thomas Röper. They try to create preemptive obedience by producing fear. That's the problem.
And another aspect of this...
And one more sentence. And those sanctions against Lipp and Röper of the European Commission are not produced in Brussels. It's like a kickback business with the German Foreign Office. They are involved. It's a Berlin business and not a Brussels business. That's the point.
And another aspect of this, we've seen a privatization of the sanctions weapon is being put to, for example, banks and other financial institutions like PayPal, so they enforce sanctions by not servicing certain people. And that started with WikiLeaks 2010, I think, when Visa and MasterCard refused to send donations to WikiLeaks. And then we seen it in many areas that they use this. Yeah.
This is the strategy, and many dissidents in Germany are facing those threats. Their bank account were cut off. They can't search for another bank. They were kicked out from their companies.
They even kicked out Anna-Lena Lipp's mother from the bank, stopped servicing her.
Ulrike Guerreau was kicked out at the Bonn University and lost in front of a court, and I was kicked out as well. The irony of the history is now I have a lecture assignment at an American university. It's completely crazy. And the third group joins the right extremist militias because they are paying very well. The average amount is $250 in those regions a month. The militias are paying $400 to $450 a month. And this motivates to go into this war business. And the propaganda is supporting that. They can present themselves as war heroes. And, well, on the Western side, on the government side of Ukraine, the propaganda works very well. In the media and in public conventions, at demonstrations, fascist groups are everywhere. This is not only a military group, it is a mass movement with camps for students and children and all that. And you heard or read that public places, streets and all that were renamed from, for example, Gorky Street to the names of former fascist leaders in Ukraine. Thousands of cases. They are burning Russian books in libraries and all that. And that works. And this has an outcome for the normal people. And it's an interesting story. I was picked up at the airport in Lvov by a friend of mine, and he brought me to Ivano-Frankivsk and Khusk, 250 kilometers south. And we drove overnight. And we were telling stories, and he told me something about working in Russia on construction sites and all that. And someday he said, well, for us here now, Hitler is a hero. I know you Germans don't like it anymore. It's absolutely crazy. Hitler in Ukraine is a hero today.
Did you say what year was this?
This was in 2021, just on the very edge of the war. I talked a lot to the people in Donbass, and a lady told me, we also were Ukrainian people. Why did they shoot at us? And now we must go the deal with Russia. We have no other option. And a friend of mine was killed by a HIMARS missile. And some months later, I visited his grave with his mother-in-law and his daughter. And we stood beside the grave, and so the ladies were crying. They stand in their tears, and I asked them, "What do you think?" And the mother-in-law said, he was 72, "I don't want this war. And I know many young people are dying, that's a pity. But for us, they are heroes. We have to be strong, and we are fighting for our family's ground. We are living here, it's our family. And we have to fight on the Russian side." And that's the difference. I met former Ukrainian soldiers who crossed the front line and now are fighting on the Russian side. And they told me, what is that war for a kind of war? We are brother countries. And this war was implemented by the West. It's completely senseless. And we have to fight this fascist government in Kiev. So I think in mass media in the West, they underestimate the role of the Maidan coup and the result of the Maidan coup. A wave of violence rolled over the country to the east. We have these massacres in Odessa, in Mariupol, and in Zaporozhye as well, all over the plain, all over the map. And this is a part of the collective consciousness of those people. All attacks are coming from the West. First you send us Napoleon, then we had the First World War, then we had the Soviet-Polish War in 1990 to 1920, then Hitler came, and now the next try, we have to fight our enemies in the West. And the West is underestimating this point, the collective memory of being threatened by forces of the West.
I remember seeing a woman from an American think tank, I don't remember which one, but it was in the beginning of the war, maybe summer 22 or 23, and she said that, well, now these economic sanctions doesn't seem to bite, so what we have to do now is send more body bags back to the Russian women so that they will dethrone Putin.
Yes.
So that's, that was a calculus.
This is absolutely an American idea.
Yeah.
They think this will work. But the Russian people will support the Kremlin more and more if they get under pressure from an external side. This is a tradition. They fought Hitler and they had 27 million dead people in the end. And they went on.
Yeah, it's very strange, and as you say, I haven't been to Russia in a long time, and I was there just as a casual observer. But when I follow Russian news, and as you said, I don't see any hate from the Russian side. They look at Ukraine and what's happening as there is sick people that got mentally like some default in the brain, and they have to deal with this.
You was warned at school because you told the truth to a student, and the truth is Russian people and the Donbass people are feeling threatened by the West. They see themselves in a defensive position, not in an offensive position. Well, I discussed in Donetsk 2 years, in late 21, and a young soldier told me, Putin is a traitor. He started this invasion up north. We needed the Russian power and the Russian army right here directly in the Donetsk region. He followed the wrong advice. This is the position of the people. Putin came too late. He should have sent the Russian army in 2014. We waited for 8 years. They are not suppressed. They felt liberated by the Russian army. It's for Western understanding, it's difficult to understand. But this is the perspective of those people.
We keep this hearing that the Ukrainians are so strong and they are really standing up for themselves, even though they are so they have such a high death rate, and they don't have as good weapons, they don't have any air defense and all this. So I was wondering, don't you think this is a little bit troubling that it's taking so much time? And now with the tomahawks maybe coming in and so on, how much time realistically do you think it can take? Do you think maybe Putin actually has underestimated the situation? Thank you.
From my point of view, the goal of the Kremlin was to bring the Western powers into a negotiation process on a pan-European peace order and an equilibristic of powers. But this is something the West did not want. So the Russian troops entered the war in February 2022 with 100,000 men, plus 90,000 militias from Lugansk and Donetsk, who were badly weaponed and all that. So almost 200,000 men. It's in a space, in an area like Ukraine, it's ridiculous. You cannot win a war with 200,000 men. It's impossible. He just wanted to start a negotiation process, and this process started in March, and late February and March, almost at the same time, between the Ukraine side and the Russian side. And with Mr. Johnson, the West blocked this negotiation process, who came almost to a conclusion in Istanbul. And the background is that the Ukraine government is financially in the hands of the West for many years, for decades. They are dependent of Western financial aid. And since 2014, the Ukraine government, the whole country is ran like an American colony. And that's the background. And I think the Russian Federation made a big mistake to attack from the north side. And they had a lot of casualties. And they tried to make a coup with a company of paratroopers near Kiev. And this operation failed completely. I think it failed. And so the Ukraine side and their Western supporters were well prepared to stop this attack from the north. And they were also well prepared. They bunkered the complete Donetsk and Lugansk region. So it is very difficult to attack those bunkers without having many casualties. And that's the background. And then the Russian Federation mobilized more troops, and now we see more than 700,000 Russian soldiers. So they made mistakes, but I think they learned from those mistakes. And the strategy and tactics of warfare changed completely during this war. In the beginning, it was not a drone war. It was a war with tanks. And now we have a train and missile war.
Just one point. I think this first operation might have been a success in one way, diplomatically towards the BRICS
Probably, yes.
countries,
Yes.
because they show that they were prepared to do everything, even having such big casualties, to try to get a peace with Ukraine without having to start a full-on war. And I think this might have shown countries like India and Brazil that they were serious about trying to solve this conflict, and it helped them to get their narrative. I don't think they care much about the Western audience because they can't influence them. But in China and countries like that, I think it might have been a diplomatic success anyway.
I was interested in knowing your opinion about this sort of Scandinavian Nordic voice. Is there still such a voice? There is next week an interesting conference in Gothenburg about possible collaboration between the Nordic countries and so on in this situation. So Finland decided brusquely, suddenly, to join NATO, and Sweden, the Swedish politicians followed this very quickly, no debate and so on. So I would be interested in knowing your opinion about this sort of Scandinavian Nordic position within this NATO situation and so on. Thank you.
With an American friend, Robert Harkavy, who was in his active days a professor for political science at the Pennsylvania State University, I investigated the Palme case with other political murders. Robert worked for the SIPRI Institute, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, during the assassination of Olof Palme. And according to NATO documents, Palme was killed because he wanted to meet Mikhail Gorbachev in Moscow in spring 1986, and he wanted to discuss the possibility of a neutral Scandinavia and a nuclear-free zone in the center of Europe. And for the leading powers of NATO and the NATO secret services, this was too much. And in international affairs, those days, Palme was an absolute authority because he separated from the interest of the United States and, well, he was an authority in bringing peace to the world. And I think this was a reason to kill him. Robert Harkavy was not only a professor of political science, he's still alive, he's now retired, living in Florida, and he was for 10 years in the Reagan area a senior advisor to the Pentagon. And every week he had a meeting, partly in Langley at the CIA. And he told me, up from the early 80s, the SEPO, the Swedish Secret Services, had an office in the building of the CIA. This was completely unknown to me. And he laughed. You don't know that? It was his experience. He saw that and he discussed with those Swedish people operating over there. And that means in the background that Swedish elites were always closely linked to Washington. And the bringing in of Sweden into NATO was planned long ago. They waited for a good chance, for the good moment. And that's the process. And they used the war in Ukraine as a transmission belt to bring Sweden into the NATO. And now you're in. And I think that's a mistake. You will pay a lot of money for rearmament. You will be part of a new space of warfare in the Baltic region. What's that? It's just Sweden got part of the fight of the unipolar world against those forces who want to get a multipolar world as an American tool and transmission belt, like Germany already is. Every taxi driver in New Delhi or Colombo understands this Ukraine war. And at the editorial boards in German press, they can't or they don't want to understand, because they get money, they receive money for their not understanding. That's the point. They are part of the whole war as a part of the propaganda war. But, well, I have to say I'm really pessimistic if the transformation from the unipolar world to the multipolar world will stay peaceful. I think we are in a process in a century of new wars. And also on the very edge of a nuclear Armageddon, because we are led by idiots. Look those people into their faces. Check Miss Baerbock. What can I see? What do you want me to say to this woman? I have no idea. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. I hope this transformation to the multipolar world will be peaceful, but I have no hope, because in Western country there is no protest, no opposition. We need a peace movement. And the demonstration in Berlin on October 3rd, we have 15 to 20,000 people. In a country with a population of 85 million, what is that? A joke? So propaganda works.
But if we just look at Ukraine and what will happen there in the coming years, I told you about a clip I saw about a Chechen fighter in Ukraine, and he was talking to a number of Ukrainian prisoners of war, and he told them that, brothers, we know what you're going through, because a big Satan from the West came and did the same to our country. They manipulated us and made us fight against our own interest.
Yes.
And now we're back to Russia and we're happy, and you're welcome to join us. And then you got Arestovich, who's been like the advisor for Zelensky, and he was predicting this war almost to the month in 2019 or something like that. But now he's saying that our future, if I become president, I will go to Russia and I will settle for peace with Putin, and I will promise we will never ever fight with Russia again. And don't you think that that kind of spirit and understanding is growing underneath the oppression in Ukraine?
Yes.
And the fighting forces of these Ukrainian men that left from Russia preparing, and that the Russian Secret Service together with these forces are preparing for a coup, and at least having the maybe not the western furthermost parts of Ukraine, but the central part, the bulk of Ukraine could flip.
Well, you have to make a difference between ordinary people and the government and the elites. What can I say? I talked to many people in the western part of the country, and they didn't want war with Russia. And they knew exactly that Western powers are trying to use Ukrainian people as a tool, and that Ukraine is paying the price. When we discussed the Maidan, they were laughing at me and said, Most demonstrators at the Maidan were paid. Didn't you know that? Everybody in Ukraine knows that, but not in the West. And because people know they were used as a tool from Western powers, more and more people say, let's make peace with Russia, and the best way to assure this peace would be to be a part of the Russian Federation. But this stops in the middle part of the Ukraine. The western part of the Ukraine has not a Russian tradition. They are very close to the West. And this was reinforced by many traveling workers who came to the European Union to make their money. They want to have open borders to make their money. And at the same time, the eastern part of the country want to have open borders to Russia, because the eastern Ukraine industry was very closely linked to Russia. They want to make their money with the Russians. So in the end of the show, we will have a divided country. That's my perspective. And yes, for Eastern Ukraine people, this was the second part of the question, it is a process of fighting against fascism. And fascism is the government in Kiev. Well, I'm optimistic that we will see a coup against Zelensky, because the end of the war is not only the political end of Zelensky, but also probably his physical end. But this will be a coup of other powers, other right-wing powers surrounding Zelensky, because those men and women, those right extremists, are controlling the security apparatus. And only the security apparatus can do something. You have no weapons in the country, except the front line. And Ukraine is a military dictatorship. You have not the space to organize something. Secret service is everywhere. You have to denounce your neighbor before your neighbor will denounce you. That's the situation, like in the Third Reich.